which is another life lesson. Quantify what you do, especially if you're in finance. Like, quantify your impact, savings, increase how you're helping a business increase income. Like, just find a way to quantify your impact in your role, no matter how junior you are. Like, do not make the mistake that I made.
Welcome to the Tech Guide podcast. I am the show's host, Ryan Atkinson. Everyone is wanting to break into tech and have a successful career. The only problem is how. We'll use this podcast to sit down with those that have broken into tech, pivoted their career, or have actual advice to young working professionals. Today, we have Joy Mbanugo on the podcast to talk about how her time at EY and BlackRock built the foundation for her to break into Google and to strive at Google. She gives advice about overcoming obstacles, rejections, and how to break into tech. She then talks about how networking and building a personal brand has impacted her career. So make sure to follow or subscribe to this podcast and share with any other friends that may want a tech guide. You can also learn more about us at techguide.org. I'm super excited for today's episode as we're welcoming Joy Mbanugo to the podcast today to talk about her life, her career. Joy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Can't wait to give unsolicited advice.
And before we do that, you've had a super successful career, but you also have a great life outside of work, which is super important, of course. Can you share with us like two of your favorite things you like to do after work to just decompress, de-stress, and really get your mind off of work?
Yeah, I was just interviewing for a job, and I was talking to a really, really smart person, and they asked, well, would you be interested in this type of company? And I was like, yes, because I'm a huge Star Trek fan. Like, I love Star Trek Next Generation. Like, I have a big crush on Captain Picard. Don't tell my husband.
Awesome.
But I make my son, who is 16 months old. I make him watch that with me. And it's so bad that he's been watching it with me since, since he was born. And it's so bad that now when he hears the music come on, he's like rocking back and forth. So that's number one. And then number two, my husband and I are big wine drinkers. Not that I'm a wino, not a too old to be a boozy hag because it makes me too tired. But I love Pinot. I love Cabernet. I love rosé, but rosé is like more of my weekend drink. But a good glass of Pinot before bed is like, night.
I love that. That is a great way to decompress. And I feel like as I get older as well, I'm finding myself to really like wine. I used to not like red wine at all, but now I'm starting to really warm up wine.
Yes.
And so let's dive in. You're a finance professional with over 20 years of audit, tax, business operations, financial planning, everything under the sun. But let's start early on in your career with your first job as a consultant with EY.
Yeah.
Take us to that time. You were in London, which is really cool as well. But did you always aspire to be a consultant, or why was that your career choice to start out?
Well, let's go back before that. When I was in 20 years, I just want people to know I started my career when I was 10. So I'm just kidding. But let's go before that. So I was at EY. I worked in 4 different offices. So it wasn't just London. It was Cleveland, DC, London, San Francisco. So I moved around quite a bit with EY. But prior to that, while I was an undergrad, I interned at Andersen, which a lot of people, may not even know who Andersen is. But Andersen, before it was the Big Four, it was the Big Five. And then prior to that was like the Big Eight. So I interned at Andersen, and I always knew that I wanted to be in finance or law or something like that. I was inspired by the consigliere in The Godfather. My mom's going to kill me. She was like, please don't ever watch that movie. And what did I do as a young person? I watched it, and I watched it all over and over. I could still watch it, and it's still so good. So anyway, the consigliere in The Godfather inspired me to become a lawyer and to think about business, not in a violent way. So I'm just thinking like strategically, I was like, oh man, the way he thinks is super neat. So I got exposed to public accounting by interning at Andersen. And while I was there and over time, I realized there's some people talk to me and they were like, hey, if you want to go into audit, you need to get an advanced degree in accounting, which I did. And if you
Yep.
want to go into tax, you need to get either an LLM in taxation or you need to get a law degree, which I also did. So it was really, I literally ended up being lucky and having an internship when I was 18, and I interned at
Wow.
Anderson for 3 summers. Yeah, I interned after my freshman, sophomore, and junior year. My senior year, I went and worked for Honey Baked Ham in their finance department closely with the
Sweet.
CFO in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is where I'm from. And so those experiences, like, looking back on it, I didn't even realize at the time how important doing that was and how
Yeah.
interning there set the foundation for my career. So if I could leave anyone with like a one of many nuggets that may come from this, hopefully, one would be do an internship. If you're in the position and you're like in an MBA or
Yeah.
still an undergrad or wherever you are in your career, your professional journey, and you still have time to make a decision, definitely do an internship. So that was the foundation that springboard me into EY because I was in Cleveland working on my master's in accountancy and I needed a job. And my dad was like, "Well, you have an accounting degree, go use it." So I emailed the alumni office. I was like, "I need a job. My dad's not going to support me anymore and I got to pay my rent." And so I ended up interviewing at EY and I got a job at EY in Cleveland. And it was one of the best experiences and one of the best. I mean, there's so many good people at EY. I have so many good things to say about it because like, looking back on my career, it set the foundation for so many opportunities that I'm getting now and so many opportunities I got after I left EY.
Interesting. What was like the foundation that it helped you build? It sounded like you had a great experience like Anderson
Yeah.
and that really got you started. But what did
Yeah.
EY? I mean, this is a huge company that's a big
Yeah.
three
Yeah.
now. I mean, what was the foundation that gave you?
Well, let's start with some soft skills because I think everybody thinks about their career and you go, especially me, like I can dive into the hyper technical and I will because
Yeah.
I think that's important. But soft skills, just one, project management. When
Nice.
you are a staff on an audit or you're a senior in an audit, like no one tells you that you need to learn project management, but you do. You end up learning. And even if you're like on a tax team or you're on the consulting side, you learn how to run a project. How
Yep.
many hours does everyone need to work? Where does everyone need to be around the world?
Awesome.
What's the budget? How are we going to make money? So you learn about project management. You learn how services business make money, and you also learn like client relationship and just building relationships and networking skills. I didn't even think when I was probably the first 5 years in my career, I didn't look at my clients as people that I could probably connect with. It didn't really
Yeah.
dawn on me to do that until I moved to DC and the partners were kind of explaining it to me. I mean, the partners in Cleveland did, but I was so junior at the time that they were doing most of the networking and that's how they won the work. So I would say like the soft skills, the project management, how to run a business and how to think about any type of business, and three, networking. Those are like three of the things I learned throughout my 11 years at EY, which I still use to this day. And then on the technical side, so much like foundational tax, audit, accounting, treasury. I mean, there's stuff like when I joined Google, and Google is a great company, but when I
Yeah.
joined Google, they hired me to do work that I did at EY like a decade ago. And so
Yeah.
my first year at Google, my first year and a half at Google, it wasn't like easy, but I knew precisely what to do because I had already done it for a very
Yeah.
long time. So EY provided a great foundation. And I think when people are confused about where to start their career, I say places like accounting firms, consulting firms, or
Yep.
companies like IBM and GE that give you the opportunity to rotate, or any
Yeah.
company that gives you the opportunity to do a rotational program is a great place to start. And tech companies. I have two different views, but for me, that's where I started because I was in Ohio and didn't
Yeah.
have exposure to Silicon Valley at that point. So,
Yeah. Was the exposure to overseas, would you recommend someone in their career? It's a big move to move overseas. Oh my God. I cannot imagine doing that, but you're shaking your head. So you would recommend
yes,
1,000% go overseas, and why? Why?
100,000,000,000%. especially if you don't have, if you don't have any financial obligations to like family, if you don't have kids, if you don't have, and if you have a spouse who can move with you, because some
Yeah.
companies will help your spouse move with you. I mean, it's such a one from a personal standpoint, it was just fun.
Oh,
I lived in London for 3 years, got paid really well. I traveled all over Europe. I went to Hong Kong with friends. I had the opportunity to go to India. I didn't go. I have like two regrets in life. That's one of two. It's point five. That one's point five. But it was just so amazing. I mean, so from a personal standpoint, so it's
yeah.
funny when I see people, Instagram is now a thing, and it was just becoming popular like when I left London. But I see people post pictures of London and like Positano is super popular. I know all the influencers are going to all these popular places. Like I went there. I went there. I went dog sledding in Norway. I went to the Great White Turf, which is like a horse race in St. Moritz. Like,
Sweet.
all of the things that are like cool and trendy on TikTok and Instagram, I always chuckle. And I'm not saying that as a brag, but it was just like fun. So number
Yeah.
one, it was fun. And then two, from a professional standpoint, it just helped me build a network, and it helped me build a network and helped me to think about different business differently. I think when you grow up in the US, we have a very US centric view of the world, and everything revolves around the US. And even worse, it revolves around your geographic location.
Yeah.
So you can get very tied up if you live in New York City. Everything in New Yorkers love them, but they think New York is the center of the world. So do Londoners. So do people in, so do people in Beijing or
Yeah.
Shanghai. Like you could get very caught up that where I am, and I live in the Bay Area, so Silicon Valley. People here,
Yeah.
this is the center of the universe. All the startups come here. Like everyone thinks that their area is important, and I think it helps you think about a worldview. And then if you go into international business or a business that has international functions, you know that a decision you make in the US may not be the same decision you can make in Europe or
That's yeah.
Africa or different parts of Asia. You just think like, okay, I need to be aware of other cultures and how they even function. Like there's a different approach to doing business in Malaysia than there is in the US. You can't do business the same way.
Yeah.
Um, that, here and even in other countries, like some countries, you just have to start with the relationship. Whereas in the US, you can just get on the phone. Things are very transactional.
But I've been fortunate enough to go overseas a few times, and I always come back with a new like perspective of the world. Oh my God, people think in such a different way. And I think that is the value of one, traveling overseas, but doing business overseas would be
Yeah.
awesome. I want to shift to BlackRock. So you moved to
Yeah.
BlackRock 2014 and oversaw a securities lending program valued at 3 trillion plus.
Yeah.
Is
Yes.
so sick. Why
Yeah.
BlackRock at that time? And can you give us that one takeaway from your time at BlackRock?
Now, can I tell you something funny first? I didn't even know it was that much. Um, I didn't even realize. So this is bad. And I hate to admit it, but I need to give one of my friends a shout out. Like I had two really good friends, Sheena and Eunice at BlackRock. And one of them said to me, like, oh, the securities lending business in the US is XYZ. And they were like, here's the pie. And like the overall business is, it was like 4 trillion in the US, or maybe it was like 3.5 trillion at the time. And the US is three
Yep.
trillion. I remember looking at the pie and I was like, oh, I'm responsible for that. Because in my mind, it was just securities. And
Yep.
I was thinking more about the funds and the rules. And, once I started to quantify it, like, which is another life lesson, quantify what you do, especially if you're in finance, fire impact,
Uh,
savings, increase how you're helping a business increase income. Like, just find a way to quantify your impact in your role, no matter how junior you are. Do not make the mistake that I made. Thank goodness I have friends who are smart enough to be like, hello, wake up. You kind of have a big role. So I ended up at BlackRock. They recruited me to work on a regulatory package that I worked on. We're at EY, of course,
EY.
in London. Duh. So I was hired to do the same thing there and implemented FATCA, but then also as part of my role, worked on securities lending, which was great because I always have loved like finance from like a personal finance standpoint. So working
Yeah.
there opened my eyes even more to the importance of saving for retirement,
Sweet.
asset management, different asset classes, and even now looking back, like thinking about it wasn't called like AI and finance, but
Yeah.
BlackRock has like their own proprietary system that they use for asset allocation. But thinking about you harnessing technology in the finance, like in the finance
Mhm.
sense, in the
Yeah.
asset management sense. So, yeah, again, another invaluable experience that I can't, very, very glad that I had the opportunity to work there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you had these great experiences at EY. You had these great experiences at BlackRock, and
Yes.
these basically parlay into breaking into Google in 2018,
Yeah.
which I think is really cool because like EY and BlackRock, these are huge companies, but they're not necessarily like tech.
Not at
So
all.
I'm curious, like, how did you make that shift into tech from these huge finance companies, consulting companies to tech?
Yeah. So I was recruited to work at EY. Sorry, EY, BlackRock, Google.
Yeah.
Work at Google to work on a project that, like I mentioned, that's something I did at EY for a long time. And so, like when Google calls, you just don't say no, right?
Oh,
Like, and,
no.
and this was 5 years ago, so very different. They're like Google's going through its own issues right now. So I know
Yeah.
people watching this will be like, "Well, I just Googled Google and it didn't look that great." Well, it is a great company, and I think everyone's going through turmoil with layoffs,
Mhm.
and I'm happy to talk about that as well and how to survive the layoff. But when Google calls, you just say yes, right? It's
That's a
almost
great.
like if a big tech company calls you, at a minimum, say yes and take the opportunity to interview. I think for me, Google, again, another one of those pivotal moments in my career. And I'm seeing the benefits of working there now because I'm interviewing for other
Yeah.
jobs and just the experiences I had and the opportunity to move around. So, what you'll see throughout my career
Yeah.
is even though I've only been at 3 companies, and I know, all of the career professionals will tell you to jump, change jobs every 2 years. And maybe that's true. I don't know. But I changed roles probably every 2 to 3 years. So if you look at while I was in Cleveland, I moved roles even while I was in Cleveland at EY.
Yep.
I left Cleveland, I went to DC for 3 years. I went to London for another 3 years, and then BlackRock 3 years. And at the end of my time at BlackRock, I knew I wanted to get out of tax and was pivoting. So as I was moving to Google, I knew I was like, in my mind, I didn't tell them, and no offense to the people who recruited me, and they know I love them, and some of the people I worked with are like amazing, amazing people.
Yeah.
But I knew going in, hey, I can do this job. I just need to get my foot in the door. I'm gonna go do this, and then I'm gonna try to go somewhere else because I know I don't want to stay in tax and treasury
Yeah.
forever because my whole background is tax, treasury, and audit, and I need to figure out what to do next. So I hadn't really formed the idea of becoming a CFO when I joined Google. It developed over time as I
Yeah.
was at Google. And Google helped me being there, and some of the people I worked with and some of the mentors and some of the CFOs I worked with while I was there, they helped form the opinion, which again set up a good foundation because some of the roles I'm interviewing for now are CFO roles.
That's really interesting. So it sounds like you've been surrounded by some like really obviously you've been surrounded by some like incredibly high performers. And at Google, like
Mm.
they're everywhere. I don't know if you guys call each other Googlers. Maybe you do.
Yeah.
But what do you think?
I mean, yeah.
What do you think of like the people at Google? I mean, what are like the top 3 characteristics if you could aggregate like the people at Google? I mean, what like really stands out? Because everyone always talks about Google, Google, Google. It's awesome. It's awesome. But like, what really makes it special with the people?
I think with the people, you have so many people who are intellectually curious. So
Mhm.
there are people, how people are like, I'm dedicated to lifelong learning. And some
Yeah, yeah,
people say that, and it's like really popular to say. But at Google, I feel like I worked with people who were really dedicated to lifelong learning. I
that's
mean,
great.
right? Like there are people working on quantum computing and like rocket science, like literally rocket scientists there. So I always felt like, wow, it's really cool to be here. So that's one. I think this is a term that I didn't come up with. I think someone in finance at Google came up with the term. So if they hear this, I'm giving them credit. It's not my term. I think a lot of Googlers are insecure overachievers. And I mean that in the nicest way possible.
And okay.
In the sense that because I think I'm that way, in the sense that they're always striving. Maybe the nicer way to say this, that they're always striving to do something greater and grander. Like,
Yep.
okay, we, if you look at the other bets, like the other, the companies outside of Google under the Alphabet umbrella, you have like robotics companies and drone companies
Yep.
and, you know, AI companies and all this other stuff. So I think that that is just an ongoing theme. Now, some of that has gone away and, because of the economy, et cetera. But that I
Yeah.
think that trait is always there. And that all encompasses what people would call googliness. Um, which
Completeness.
yeah, which, is a trait that you are measured on when you're interviewing and people are like, what is googliness? And it's like one, being respectful, two, being intellectually curious, and three, just like striving. That's the way I define it. Some people may define it another way, but all of those traits, I feel like a lot of the people I worked with had those traits, and some, not all, I'm gonna be honest here. Some of the people there were just like really awesome, amazing, good people. Like really, really nice, good people that you wouldn't think as smart and as accomplished as they would be as nice as they were. And there are just some really amazing and awesome people there.
That's amazing. And so when you like think about like those traits, if there's one that you think someone who is outside of tech or is in their early careers, one that they should like really focus on, being like basically always striving for more, respectfulness, intellectually curious. I mean, is there one that like really stands out people should focus on?
Yeah, intellectual curiosity. I mean, I think like being respectful, hopefully that's just like in the core
That's great. Yeah.
of who you are as a person. Not everybody, but hopefully it is. But I think if you're intellectually curious for any tech company, I think that's what a lot of the tech companies are looking for. People who want to know more. I mean, let's say you want to join a company and they are like a food-based company,
Yeah.
or they do some new tech, or they do AI, and like AI is a new, it's the new hot shiny thing. Well,
Yeah.
get curious. Have you even opened up an AI tool?
Yeah.
Have you used Jasper, Chat GPT? And the other thing is like intellectual curiosity. And I've written about this, like, do some research, like dive into what you want to learn about, or dive into like the company, what the company does. If you have a target company, dive into it, find all of the articles written about it. I mean, that's the lawyer in me. And my mom is like a research nerd. I have to give a shout out to my mom. She's a total nerd. She's always saying, I'm like, she, she's always sending me articles about stuff. But I think that intellectual curiosity is important. And even more so now, because I think people are going to be relying on AI tools. And,
Yep.
what blows my mind now is that people are going to TikTok for search. Like, you
That's
know, that is crazy to me. So I know different demographics use different tools and social media in different ways. But for me, I always assumed, you use a search engine for a search. And I never thought of TikTok as a search engine, but it is.
yeah.
So do, even go on TikTok and searching, but back in the day, if you had to write a paper, you would go to like encyclopedias, you would go to the library
Yeah.
and get a physical book, and you'd have to cite your sources and all that.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so do that, but via computer, and just learn as much as you can about an area. I can't say enough about intellectual curiosity.
That's interesting. Is there an area where you think people should be focusing on that are young in their career? Obviously, AI is the huge one right now, but are there areas that you think people should really focus on to like learn the skills? And I mean, everyone is curious in their own ways, but should people focus on being curious in this area a little bit more?
I think AI is the obvious one. I'm going to say finance, because you can never know, you can never know too much about finance. In every aspect of finance. Crypto, not saying, people know I love to talk about
Yeah.
crypto.
Yeah.
You don't have to invest. You don't have to go out and buy. I'm not telling anybody go buy Bitcoin, Shiba, Dogecoin, whatever the new meme coin. I'm not saying that. Just know about it. Know about blockchain technology and just finance in general. I feel like
Yeah.
we just aren't taught about personal finance and
Facts.
planning for retirement, 401k, Roth IRA, backdoor Roth, and like every bit of personal finance, life insurance, checking account, like dig into it. Yahoo Finance is a great resource for that, and bankrate.com. The other thing that I think about it a lot only because I have a lot of older people in my family is
Yeah.
so my grandmother, I have a grandmother who, m- well, hopefully, luckily will turn 100 this year. And then another one who is not too far behind her. She would kill me if I told her real age, but she's
Yeah.
up in age. And so I think about aging a lot because a lot of people in my family live for a very long time. And I know there's that guy who's like hacking his health and he's like 10 in the inside, but he's really 40 and all that. And what's interesting, and there's this whole thing about farm to table and following the octogenarian's diet and all of that. But what a lot of people don't know is that people in the South who were born in the early 1900s followed that diet because they had to. Right. So I always laugh when I see farm to table restaurants. Like my grandma's been farm to table. She's from South Carolina. She grew up on a farm, you know, eating chickens off the field and food out of the field and
Yeah.
right out of the dirt. So like when I see that now, I'm just like, the family's been doing that.
Yeah.
And so I think that will be a super interesting area because it will just create like just different businesses that I think people aren't thinking
Yeah.
about. We're starting to see it now with food, but I think it will turn into like biohacking or something else.
Yeah, I do agree. And I think my generation, there's a ton of studies that like we're drinking less. And I think just
Yes.
as a whole, like Gen
Yes.
Zers, they're wanting to drink less, they're wanting to be healthy. And Brian
Yeah.
Johnson, he's the one
Yes.
that's with an
Yeah.
epigenetic age thing. It's
Yes.
incredible. And starting out with Gen Zers, they are just getting into their career. Let's just say
Yeah.
we're fresh out of school or
Yep.
22, 23, bright eyed,
Yep.
smiles all over our faces. I mean, what
Yep.
advice would you give to someone our age?
Take a risk. Do something that your friends aren't doing. If they're doing this, if all of your friends are doing the same thing, do something that they're not doing. If
Yep.
you live in Ohio, I pick on Ohio a lot because I'm from there. People like to stay there. There's nothing wrong with that. But I challenge you to move somewhere. Pick
I
up and
like,
move. You can always move back to
yep.
wherever you're from. Um, but that's always a piece of advice. I feel like it is, you know, me moving around was one of the best things that has happened to me and landing in California. I never expected to be here. Actually, when I moved to London, I planned on moving back to New York. And so that's another story for another podcast. But I ended up in California. It was one of the best things that happened to me. So I would say if there's a city that you dreamed of, like you see on TV, oh, I'm going to move to Austin, go pick up and go. Go waitress, go do any job, get 5, 10, 20 roommates. Like I remember there was somebody who lived in a mansion and there were like 10 of them. And it was really cool how they had a house. It was almost like living in a dorm or whatever, a fraternity house or sorority house. But anyway, move. I would say just try it, especially if you're 21, 22. I'm not in my 20s. If someone asked me to move right now with the baby and house and husband, it's just like even the thought, I'm just like, oh, I have so much stuff. We're at 22, like graduating college. You got, you may have like a suitcase worth of clothes. Maybe you have furniture. Maybe you don't. Sell your furniture, your college furniture and move out of the country if you can, visa issues, but,
Yeah.
or do something adventurous. Do something that you don't think you can do and take that risk and don't worry about what your friends are doing. Your friends will be there. And if they're not, get new friends.
Yeah, that's I was lucky enough. I grew up in Iowa, so pretty similar to Ohio. Yeah, I got out of Iowa, went to Boston, and then
Yeah.
down in Austin now, and it was the best decision
Yeah.
I've ever made. So I'm
Yeah.
echoing that advice right
Yeah.
there.
And you're in the like hot spot. Like Austin's like it's the thing right now. Yeah. Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
for me. I will advocate for it till I die. But I'm also thinking like long term for my own career. I feel like I am very happy with my career where it's at, but I'm gonna try and like scale this thing and like really grow my career. So like what you're doing, like you have a
Yeah.
phenomenal career. What obstacles do you think I will overcome that I might not be thinking about right now, but I should consider longer down the road?
Rejection.
Mm,
rejection is really hard. Being laid off. I just got laid off from Google. And for some people, that's devastating. But for me, having had to hunt for a job or being well connected was not as devastating for me. And also being in finance and reading the tea leaves. Like I have to plug all of my work, but I did a podcast with Entrepreneur Magazine last year in April, and I was like, a recession is coming." Like, because you were
I remember that.
what was happening last year is all of the VC funding was starting to slow down, but nobody was really paying attention. All of the VCs and the finance fancy people, they were paying attention, and somehow I stumbled upon this information. I was like, "Oh, something bad is coming." And so I knew last year, I didn't know that it would be to this scale,
Yeah.
and we'd have like all these massive layoffs, but I would say you may not even be thinking, as you go along your career, you think your career is linear. It's not. You'll run into pitfalls and it's okay. Like I think people run into obstacles and they get really bummed out and it could throw them off track. But
Yeah.
my advice to anyone is, if you're going along in your career and let's say 10 years from now, you get laid off or you don't get a promotion. I could have a whole series on not getting a promotion. Like I've been
Yeah.
overlooked for promotions so many times. Guess what? Somebody will give you the promotion you want. You may not get it where you think you should get it, but you may get something that's even better. And so I know that sounds very like manifest, dude, all
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
hype around, but trust me, in the 20 years that I've been working, I've seen it happen. I'm seeing it happen now. You will bounce back. And I think what's really important is how you respond to a pitfall, right?
Yeah.
Don't let yourself go down a spiral. Don't go down the black hole of despair, which, is easy to say, easier said than done. I'm not a mental health expert, but
Yeah.
don't go down the hole of despair.
I love that. And you talked about it like a little bit. I mean, like you were unfortunately impacted by the layoffs at Google, but
Yeah.
I mean, how are you like bouncing back from that, or like what are you
Yeah.
looking for now that you are free,
Yeah.
or I shouldn't say free,
No,
but like
no, you should
now that
be
you're
free.
now that you can
Oh,
now that now that you are able to look for new opportunities. I mean, take us
yeah.
through that time. I mean, like what are you
Yeah.
doing for your own job search?
Yeah. So what's been super neat about my job search is that I have such a great community and
Yeah.
it's from networking. And I was super intentional. And this is where you and I met about a year ago or more than a year ago. While I was on maternity leave, my time frame's getting all mixed up. I was on maternity leave, yes, at the beginning of 2022. And while I was on maternity leave, I was like, I need to I want to be a CFO. I'm not
Yeah.
going to be a CFO at Google. And so I need to start to think about my brand and I need to change my brand to be about Joy, the finance phenom, Joy, the finance expert, Joy, the crypto gal, like whatever
Yeah.
version of me you want to call me versus Joy who works at Google. And so I started a rebrand and started being very intentional about networking. And I also wanted to land a board seat. And so that has helped me because as soon as I announced that I was laid off, I had like one person email me and say, I have a job for you, like right now, like come to my office. And I can talk about that. But so many great opportunities, so many people. I haven't really had to affirmatively apply for a job per se. And I think at my level, what's important for people to know is that my network is everything. Like my next role is not going to come from me going on a website and clicking a link and applying that way. I am now you can come back to me in April or May and confirm, but I'm pretty certain that my next role will come from either someone I currently know or like a reference through someone I know.
Yep.
So I've been, people have been reaching out to me and, there's the Zoogler network. That's what you
Yep.
call ex Googlers. And there's like one guy on LinkedIn. He's like amazing. I think his James Wong. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he's like created a whole community of Zooglers.
Amazing.
And it's like going around the world and I'm sure we'll see like a whole bunch of startups pop out of that community.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, but my network has been amazing, and even my husband was like, "Hey, do you want to talk to my CEO?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" He's like, "He's well connected. He can find you a job." I'm like, "Sure." So
Yes.
yeah, my community has been great. I have one offer in hand, and just maybe potentially, hopefully, start an interview process with another company. So we shall see.
That's amazing. And so would that be advice that you would give to someone my age as well, is build that personal brand because if
Yeah.
something does happen.
Yeah, two things. Build a personal brand independent of your company.
Yep.
Because especially in tech, people get really, really attached to their companies, and it's
Yeah.
easy. I have friends who worked at Uber and, were laid off at one point, and thankfully their whole identity wasn't caught up in that. But like, you can like, I'm employee number this, and like you'll hear people talking in those terms, especially if they're an early employee. Like, I was number 50 at this company, and I was number da, da, da. I think I was like number 130,000, 131,000, da, 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 da. Like, that was me. So I met that person. But two things, yes, absolutely. Develop your brand Develop your brand on LinkedIn. I'm old school. Ryan, you and I talk about this all the time about TikTok,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
like, how, like, TikTok is addictive. First of all, I'm
Yep.
just on there. I'm like, I need to put my phone down. I don't even know how they know I like these things. Like, this is crazy. But establishing your brand at a minimum on LinkedIn is important. And the other thing I did is created a website because I felt like LinkedIn is good, but I wanted to also own my own IP. Like,
Yeah.
I
Oh yeah.
want to own who I am. Like, I didn't want any company, I won't name them, but I didn't want any
Yeah.
company or any social media platform owning my brand. Like, I own my own brand. I sometimes write my own articles. Haven't had articles written in magazines and all this stuff. And yes, and that's great. And I love it. But I also write on Medium because I want to own my own ideas, my own brand, and all that. And that's so important. But then, in addition to that, using a platform like LinkedIn as you're establishing your brand
Yep.
to network. Like, yeah, I can't say enough about networking.
I love it. And last question for you. This has been phenomenal, but you want to look back. Let's just fast forward the clock, however many years, and you look back on your career. I mean, what do you want to be most proud of when it's all said and done?
I want to be most proud of helping other people rise throughout their careers. I feel like I'm getting to a place where I was having a conversation. Every team I worked on, I tell people who that I lead, I'm like, hey, in a couple of years, you should be doing my job if you want it.
That's
Like,
awesome.
I'm not offended if you're coming for me and you're nipping at my heels. You should be. I want you to be. I want to work with people who are intellectually curious, who are always striving. Like, you should take
Love
my
it.
role. And so I want to look back and, when I become a CFO, I'm going to look back and think, okay, I helped other people become C-level executives. Like, it's not just about me and, oh, I'm so great. And da, da, da. Like, I really do. I feel like I've had so much help, and I've just been so lucky, so fortunate. I want to make sure I continue to help people strive in their careers.
Perfect. And I think this was step one in doing that because Joy, you have been great. You have given a ton of great advice for us. So thank you so, so much for joining us. This was an awesome episode.